Hello there. Tonight we are continuing a story. Not starting over, not recapping, simply continuing. The way the plane continues, the way the seasons continue, the way the pre-dawn practice continues, from one morning to the next, without requiring an announcement that it is doing so. You know this place, the Yamatai plain, the cedar walls, the silk curtain and the brother's measured, unhurried voice, the treasury in the cold northern end of the palace, where 5 mirrors wait in their lacquered boxes, the pre-dawn dark and the frequency that was always there, waiting for someone quiet enough to notice it. You know her, the girl who said yes in the lamp-lit council chamber, who did not sleep on the first night of her reign, who held something over the fire with steady hands and received what arrived, who moved the silk curtain from the center of the hall to the edge of it, which was a decision that took one long, sleepless night to arrive at, and changed everything. Who stood on the edge of the autumn plain for the first time in years and watched a crane cross the sky from east to west and felt something release that she had not known was held. Time has passed since we left her. More time than a single night's listening can account for. The chronicles will not record how much, because the chronicles do not record the passing of ordinary time, only events. And what has been happening is not events. It is something slower and more significant than events. It is a life finding its shape. There is still ground to cover. The long, quiet years and what they sound like when a life has found its rhythm. The questions she will stop asking, and what the silence sounds like after they are gone. The shape of what she built, visible only from the right distance. The story that was almost lost, and how the soil kept it anyway. And finally, the last ordinary morning that does not know it is the last. These are the things we are here for tonight. If this journey helps you find rest, please feel free to like the video and subscribe. It lets me know this work is reaching someone. And leave a comment. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me what time it is. Close your eyes now. The modern world is behind you. Its noise and its urgency falling away, the way bark peels slowly from an old cedar in long, quiet strips and lands without drama on the dark forest floor. You are back on the Yamatai plain. The same mineral smell of the soil. The same wide indigo sky. The same mountains, patient and dark, on every horizon. The same wind moving through the silver grass. But something is different from the first time you stood here. The plain is settled. Not the tense, held breath plain of the first part, weighted with the uncertainty of a world that had just lost its center and did not yet know what came next. This plain has found its rhythm. The grain is moving on the roads between the settlements. The tributary messengers are making their seasonal rounds. The drums from the south have been silent for years now, long enough that the silence has stopped being notable and has become simply the condition of things. The palace at the edge of the compound is the same palace it has always been. Cedar and silk and packed earth and the smell of old incense and the specific, particular quality of air that has been circulating through the same rooms for long enough that the air itself has acquired a character. But the palace is different in the way that anything is different after years of being inhabited by someone who has become part of it. The inner chamber knows her breathing now. The cedar walls know the specific pressure of her posture. The rush mats know which side of the room she crosses first in the pre-dawn hour. The oil lamp in the corner has been relit for her so many thousands of times that the maiden who tends it does so without thought, the way the body breathes without thought. She is in there now, in the treasury, at the northern end of the palace, where the air is colder than anywhere else in the compound, and the cedar shelves hold their lacquered boxes with the specific, patient steadiness of objects that have been waiting for a very long time and have made peace with the waiting. She comes here in the evenings sometimes. The maiden who tends the treasury knows her footstep in the corridor and has the lamp lit before she arrives. Scuff, pause, scuff. The lamp is already burning. This is where we begin tonight. Not with a battle, not with a crisis, with a lamp already burning, and a door about to open, and 5 mirrors in their boxes, patient and cold and entirely ready for whatever quality of attention she brings to them this evening. Sink down into the plane. Sink down into the settled rhythm and the cedar smell and the cold northern treasury and the lamp that was lit before she arrived. The story is continuing. It never stopped. And it is very, very quiet. Listen. Listen to the sound of objects that have been waiting. The treasury is at the northern end of the palace compound, in a low, wide building of cedar and packed earth whose walls are thicker than the walls of any other structure in the complex. The thickness is not for warmth. It is for temperature stability, for the maintenance of the cool, dry, mineral air that bronze requires to slow its oxidation, to remain, for as long as possible, something closer to what it was when it was made. The treasury knows this, the way buildings know the purpose for which they were built. It holds its coolness with a particular, deliberate steadiness, as if the walls themselves are concentrating on it. The air inside is different from the air of the palace corridors, different from the inner chamber with its incense smoke and its cedar warmth. It is simpler, colder, older somehow, as if the air in this room has been circulating between the same walls for long enough that it has acquired its own character. She comes here in the evenings sometimes. Not every evening, but often enough that the maiden who tends the treasury knows her footstep in the corridor and has the lamp lit before she arrives. Scuff, pause, scuff. The lamp is already burning. She steps inside. Close your eyes and feel the quality of the treasury air against your face. It is cooler than the corridor by several degrees, the drop immediate and complete, the way stepping into the shadow of a large rock is immediate and complete. The smell is the smell of old metal and cedar and the specific, dry, almost dusty aroma of objects that have been still for a long time. Objects that have accumulated, in their stillness, a kind of density, a weight that is more than their physical mass. The weight of what they have been through and where they have been and whose hands have touched them. The mirrors are arranged on cedar shelves along the inner wall, some of them in lacquered boxes, the boxes stacked carefully, the lacquer still intact on the older ones, slightly chipped at the corners on the oldest ones. Some of them wrapped in silk that has faded from its original colour to the particular dusty grey-violet of silk that has been in the dark for a very long time. A few of them unwrapped, resting directly on the cedar shelves, their backs visible, the swirling engraved patterns of their continental manufacture accumulating the slow, green patina of long oxidized bronze. She knows each of them. Not intimately, not yet. She is still learning them, but she is learning. Inhale, and the cold treasury air fills the lungs. Exhale, and the mirrors settle in the dark. She moves to the shelf where Himiko's personal mirrors are kept. Not the great ceremonial mirrors, the ones used in the public rituals. The personal ones. The ones that Himiko kept in the inner chamber, that travelled with her through the decades of her reign, that received the light of 10,000 lamps and reflected the faces of 10,000 decisions. There are 5 of them. She knows this. She has counted them on other evenings, running her fingers along the edges of their lacquered boxes with the same quality of attention she brings to the pre-dawn practice. 5 mirrors. 5 objects that were, for the decades of Himiko's reign, tools, not decorations, not symbols. Tools in the way that the bone is a tool. Instruments for the work of the oracle. She lifts the box of the smallest one. It is lighter than she expects, every time, because she approaches it with the expectation of the weight of its significance, rather than the weight of its physical mass. She opens the box. The mirror inside is wrapped in silk. She unwraps it with slow, deliberate movements, the silk falling away from the bronze in stages, revealing first the edge, then the surface of the back with its engraved patterns, then the face. Tink! The mirror makes a small, clear sound as it settles against the inside of the box. Brief, crystalline. The voice of the bronze acknowledging that it has been touched. She holds it in both hands. The face of the mirror is dim in the lamplight, tarnished to the deep, warm brown of old bronze, its reflecting surface reduced by oxidation to a quality of reflection that is more suggestion than image. She can see herself in it, barely. A shape, a presence, the suggestion of a face that is familiar but not specific. She thinks about Himiko looking into this mirror. Thud. 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 Far away. The nighttime settlement. It is a strange thought. Not uncomfortable. Strange the way deep things are strange. Himiko looked into this surface. This specific, physical surface. The same bronze. The same engraved back. The same slightly warped face. And whatever she saw in it, whatever the mirror gave back to her in the quality of its dim, patient reflection, informed something, contributed something, to the decades of decisions that held the 100 villages together and maintained the political authority that Iyo inherited, and is now, in her own way, continuing. The mirror is a record. Not in the way the written document from the way is a record. The document contains language. The mirror contains light. All the light it has ever reflected. Gone now, of course. Not literally stored in the bronze, but present somehow in the object's accumulated history. In the fact of what it has been used for, and by whom, and over how many years. Breathe in the cold, metal-scented air of the treasury. Let the weight of the mirror in your hands settle into your awareness. It is heavier than it was a moment ago. or the awareness of its weight has increased. It is difficult to say which. She is 14 now, almost 15. The year has turned since the day of the council, and she has been the queen for long enough that the being of it has begun to feel less like something she is doing and more like something she is. The weight has settled in. The bones have found a way to carry it. But the mirrors have been waiting longer than she has been the queen. Some of them have been in this treasury since before she was born. Some of them arrived on the ships of the way during the years of Himiko's correspondence, and have been here since, accumulating their patient, cold, mineral presence in the dark. She holds the mirror a little longer. Then she wraps it carefully in its silk. She places it back in its box. She closes the box. Tink. The sound again. The mirror settling. The bronze acknowledging the return to stillness. She moves to the next shelf. Sink down into the treasury dark. Sink down into the cold, metal-scented air and the cedar shelves and the patient, waiting presence of the mirrors in their boxes. The lamp is burning. The objects are still. And the oracle is learning the history of the tools she has inherited, one careful evening at a time. Just breathe. Just rest. The treasury will hold everything, and the bronze remembers every light it has ever been given. Listen. Listen to the sound of the past in the present. She has been coming to the treasury for months now, long enough that the routine of it has settled into her evenings, the way the pre-dawn practice has settled into her mornings. A fixed point, a regular return to something that replenishes rather than depletes. She does not always hold the mirrors. Sometimes she simply sits in the cool, metal-scented air and breathes, and allows the presence of the objects to be what it is. But tonight she has asked the brother a question that has been forming in her mind for several weeks. She has asked him what he knows about how Himiko used the mirrors. He has been the brother for a long time, long enough that he served in that role during the final years of Himiko's reign. He was younger then. He was, in fact, not yet the brother, but the assistant to the brother, which meant he was present at many of the ritual occasions without being the primary intermediary, a witness rather than a participant, which means he saw things that the primary intermediary, focused on his own role, sometimes did not notice. He thinks for a moment before answering. She has learned to read his thinking silences, the way she reads the bone before the crack. This one is the silence of someone assembling a memory that is specific and detailed, and that he is uncertain whether to offer in full or in summary. She waits. Murmur. Pause. Murmur. He says, she used them differently at different times of her life. He says, when she was younger, she used the great ceremonial mirrors, the large ones in the public rituals, the bone burning and the smoke reading, and the formal occasions of the oracle's address to the gathered chieftains. He says, the great mirrors were the tools of the performance, of the ceremony, of the making of authority visible to those who needed to see it. He pauses again. Inhale, and the memory surfaces. Exhale, and the telling continues. He says, in her later years, she used the personal mirrors differently. She used them privately, in the inner chamber, alone, or with only one or two of the senior maidens present. He says, He does not know what she did with them in those private sessions because he was not present, but he knows the quality of the room when she emerged from them, the particular stillness, the specific quality of the silence that followed, the way she spoke in the hours after the private mirror work, more slowly, with more space between the words, as if she had been somewhere and was still, partially, there. She sits with this for a moment, the cold air of the treasury, the lamp, the cedar shelves with their patient mirrors. She says, "Where do you think she went?" He is quiet for a long time, the longest thinking silence she has observed from him. She waits without pressure. The question is not urgent. It is genuinely open. She wants to know what he thinks, not what he knows. He says, "I think she went where the frequency is. I think the mirrors were the way she got there." He says, "I think the reflecting surface was not a window. It was a door." She looks at the shelf of personal mirrors, the 5 boxes, the wrapped and unwrapped bronze. A door. She has been thinking of the mirrors as records, as objects that carry the history of the hands that touched them, as tools that Himiko used in ways she is still learning. She has not been thinking of them as doors, but she has been thinking of the bronze mirror in her lap on the evening in the inner chamber when she was too tired to try, and the frequency was simply there, and the understanding came sideways. She remembers what she thought in the moment before the understanding arrived fully formed. She thought, "The mirror does not try to reflect. It simply has the quality of being able to reflect. A door does not try to open. It simply has the quality of being able to open." Inhale, and the understanding forms. Exhale, and the treasury is still. She picks up the nearest box, the second smallest mirror. She opens it, unwraps the silk, holds the mirror in both hands in the lamplight. The face of the bronze is dim, warm, patient. The reflection it gives back is the same as always. A shape, a presence, the suggestion of a face. She breathes. She holds the mirror the way she holds the bone over the fire. Not with direction, with presence, with the willingness to allow whatever is going to happen, and to be still enough and quiet enough and empty enough that it can. The lamp flickers, once. The reflection in the mirror shifts, briefly, from the warm, dim brown of the tarnished bronze to something slightly lighter, slightly more present, as if the bronze has momentarily chosen to reflect more clearly than it usually does. It lasts for a fraction of a second, less, but she sees it. She does not move. She does not reach toward it. She simply allows herself to have seen it, and remains in the posture of having seen it, and breathes. The mirror is dim again, patient, still. But the door, she understands, is there. It has always been there. Himiko found it, used it, built a reign of decades on the other side of it. And now it is Iyo's treasury, and Iyo's mirror, and Iyo's evening in the cold, metal-scented dark. She wraps the mirror, places it back in its box, closes the lid. Tink. The bronze acknowledges the return to stillness. She acknowledges the bronze. She sits for a while longer in the treasury air, not practicing, not trying to go anywhere, simply present with the mirrors and the lamp and the cold and the knowledge that the door is there and that she has seen it, and that seeing it is enough for tonight. Sink down into the cold treasury dark. Sink down into the lamp and the mirrors and the knowledge that arrived sideways, the way the best understandings always do. The mirrors are in their boxes. The lamp is burning. The treasury is holding everything in its cool, patient, mineral way. Just breathe. Just rest. The door is there. It will be there tomorrow. And the bronze remembers every person who has ever stood at its threshold. Listen. Listen to the sound of one oracle speaking to another across the distance of years. It is deep winter now, the coldest part of the year, the weeks when the plain outside the palace is grey and flat, and the mountains have retreated behind a permanent low ceiling of cloud, and the air in the corridors is cold enough that breath is briefly visible when you step out of a heated room into an unheated one. The treasury is colder than usual. The thick walls that maintain its temperature so well in the other seasons are maintaining it now too, holding the cold in with the same fidelity with which they hold out the heat of summer. She is wrapped in an extra robe. The cold does not bother her as much as it used to. The body acclimates. The body is, in the end, very good at adjusting to the conditions in which it finds itself. This is one of the things she has learned in the year and some months of being the queen. The body is more cooperative than she expected. It adjusts. It finds ways. It carries what is asked of it with a reliability that she has come to depend on, and occasionally to be quietly grateful for. She has all 5 of Himiko's personal mirrors out tonight, unwrapped, arranged on the mat in front of her in the order she has determined, through months of handling them, represents their age. The oldest one at the left, the most recent at the right. She does not know if this order is correct in any verifiable sense, but it is the order that feels right, which is, she has decided, a sufficient form of knowledge for the purpose. The lamp burns between her and the mirrors. Its light falls across their faces unevenly, catching the raised edges of the engraved patterns on their backs, creating a shifting, low-relief landscape of light and shadow. She is going to speak to Himiko. Not literally. She has no illusions about the literal. Himiko is in the mound on the plain, in the cold stone room, in the company of her 100 attendants, and her mirrors, and her golden seal. She is not available for conversation, but the mirrors are. And the mirrors carry, in their accumulated history of use, something of the quality of the hands and the mind and the practice of the person who used them. Not a ghost, not a spirit in the way the stories mean spirits, something more subtle than that. The way a room carries the quality of the person who has lived in it for a long time. Not their presence, their impression. Inhale, and the winter cold deepens. Exhale, and the treasury is still. She begins with the oldest mirror. She holds it in both hands. She looks into its face, dim and patient, in the lamplight. And she speaks, not aloud, in the interior voice, the voice she uses in the pre-dawn practice, when she is setting down the thoughts that arrive and returning to the breath. The voice that is not quite thought and not quite speech, but something in between. She says, I don't know what I'm doing. She waits. The mirror is dim, patient. The lamplight moves slightly as the air shifts in the treasury, the flame adjusting to a microscopic current, the reflection in the bronze shifting with it. She says, I think I'm doing it. I think it's working. The drums stopped. The grain is moving again. The way sent ships and acknowledged my name. The chieftains are sending their seasonal messengers. From the outside, it probably looks like I know what I'm doing. The mirror is still, patient, bronze brown in the lamplight. She says, I'm still learning your mirrors. I'm still learning your palace. I'm still learning the frequency. Some mornings it's there immediately. Some mornings I sit for the entire pre-dawn hour and it doesn't come at all. And I don't know if I did something wrong or if that's just how it is. She pauses. The oldest mirror, the one that has been here the longest, the one that has absorbed the most. She says, I found the door. I think I found the door. I don't know if it's the same door you found. Maybe there's only one door. Maybe there are many. I don't know. The elder hasn't said. The lamp flickers. She watches the reflection shift. She says, I think you would have been good at this. I think you were good at this. The chronicles say you held it together for decades. I don't know how you did it for decades. I've been doing it for a year, and I'm already tired in a way I didn't know was possible. She pauses again. She says, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying. The treasury is completely still. The 5 mirrors in their row. The lamp between her and them. The cold winter air holding everything in its mineral patience. She says, I'll keep going. I know how to keep going. You showed me how, without meaning to, by leaving these mirrors in the cedar boxes in the treasury, with their silk wrappings and their lacquered lids. You kept going until you couldn't, and then you left everything in order. That's what I'm going to do. Inhale, and the cold air fills the chest. Exhale, and the words settle into the treasury dark. She wraps the oldest mirror, places it back in its position, moves to the second oldest, holds it, looks into it, does not speak this time, simply holds it and breathes, and allows the quality of the presence of the object to be what it is. One by one, she works through all 5, holding each one, breathing, allowing the connection, whatever it is, whatever kind of connection is possible between a living oracle and the mirrors of her predecessor, to be what it is. She does not try to define it. She does not try to make it into something it is not. She simply maintains the contact, the way you maintain the bone over the fire, steadily, without direction, with the willingness to receive whatever arrives. What arrives tonight is not dramatic. It is not a crack. It is not a shift in the quality of the bronze's reflection, or a movement in the lamplight, or a sound that arrives from no identifiable source. What arrives is something quieter than any of those things. It is the knowledge that she is not alone. Not in the sentimental way. Not in the way of feeling surrounded by loving presences. In the practical way. The factual way. the way that a person who has inherited a set of tools from a skilled practitioner is not alone because the tools themselves carry the instruction, because the method is in the doing, because the practice, repeated daily in the pre-dawn dark of the inner chamber, is the transmission of the lineage, whether or not the person who established it is still alive. Himiko is in the mound, but the practice is here. The mirrors are here. The treasury is here. The frequency is here. The elder is still walking the corridors with her tap, tap, tap. The brother is still carrying the messages through the silk curtain with his quiet, worn efficiency. The palace is still breathing. The plain is still wide and patient outside the thick cedar walls. She is not alone. She wraps the last mirror, places it back in its box, closes the lid. Tink. She sits for a moment in the stillness of the completed circuit. 5 mirrors, held and returned. 5 objects that belong to the person who held this role before her, engaged with, communicated with, in whatever way communication is possible across the years and the stone and the mound. She breathes out, slowly, all the way. She stands. She wraps her extra robe more tightly around her shoulders. She picks up the lamp. She moves toward the treasury door. At the threshold, she pauses, the way she always pauses at thresholds, the habit of the practice applied to the physical world. The moment of acknowledgement, the moment of transition. Then she steps through, into the corridor, into the cold night air of the winter palace, into the continuing work. Sink down into the winter treasury dark. Sink down into the 5 mirrors in their boxes, and the cold air, and the lamp burning between the oracle and the past. The conversation is complete. The mirrors are resting, and the queen is walking back through the corridor, her footsteps light and deliberate in the dark, carrying with her the knowledge that she is not alone. Good night. Just breathe. The mirrors are keeping faith with the past. The treasury is holding everything. And the conversation continues in the only way it ever really continues. In the doing, in the practice, in the daily, patient, unglamorous, essential work of being present. Listen. Listen to the sound of a rain finding its rhythm. Several years have passed. Not dramatically. Time in the Yamatai does not pass dramatically in the ordinary run of things. It passes the way the seasons pass on the plain outside the palace walls, with the reliable, unhurried authority of something that does not need to announce itself. Spring comes because it is time for spring. The harvest comes because it is time for the harvest. The rains come and the rains stop, and the birds return and the birds depart, and the light changes its angle against the cedar planks of the inner chamber wall. And all of this happens with a patience so deep and so consistent that you stop noticing it the way you stop noticing the sound of your own breathing. And in that ordinary, rhythmic, profoundly unremarkable time, something is growing. Scuff, bow, murmur, scuff. The morning meetings have a different quality now. Not different in their content exactly. The grain stores still need monitoring. The roads still need maintaining. The tributary relationships still need the regular, patient work of acknowledgement and reciprocity that keeps them alive. But the quality of the meetings is different, more settled, more efficient. The officials who come through the outer corridors move with the particular confidence of people who know what they are bringing and how it will be received, and what will come back through the silk curtain in response. She knows them now, not just their roles, their rhythms. The senior administrator of the grain stores has a slight hesitation before delivering numbers that are below the expected threshold. A fraction of a second's pause that she has learned to read as the prelude to a correction or a concern. The road commissioner uses a specific phrase, barely conscious, when he is about to request resources that he is uncertain will be approved. The military commander clears his throat once before anything that he considers urgent. She reads these signals the way she reads the silk curtain, the way she reads the cracked bone, with the whole of her attention, without urgency, without reaching toward the conclusion before it arrives. The brother has noticed. He has not said anything. He does not need to say anything. It is present in the quality of his own performance, which has become, over the years, more relaxed. Not less precise, more relaxed. The relaxation of a person who trusts the system they are operating within, who knows that the messages they carry will be received well, processed well, responded to well, who has stopped bracing for the uncertainty that was there in the beginning. Inhale, and the years breathe through the palace. Exhale, and the rhythm settles deeper. The tributary relationships are stable, more than stable. They have developed over the years of regular exchange into something that resembles the easy familiarity of long acquaintance. The representatives of the nearer chiefdoms who come for the seasonal visits are beginning to show, in small and entirely unofficial ways, the comfort of people who have made this journey many times, and who are not performing their loyalty so much as expressing it. They bring things that are not tribute. A seed variety that is doing well in their particular soil. A technique for repairing roads in wet conditions. Information about the movement of people and goods in their region that goes beyond the formal requirements of the report. They are talking, not just delivering, talking. This is the thing that the gathering after the drums taught her, the thing she has been cultivating deliberately since then. The difference between a network that is held together by authority and a network that is held together by relationship. The first kind requires the continuous assertion of the center. The second kind generates its own gravity. The nodes maintain their orientation toward the center, not because the center demands it, but because the center is worth orienting toward. Because something is happening there that is worth being part of. She has been making the Yamatai worth being part of. Not through dramatic gestures, through the accumulated quality of daily attention, through the meetings conducted with care, and the responses calibrated with honesty, and the relationships maintained with the same patient, sustained effort that the pre-dawn practice requires. Through being, day after day, the kind of center that a network wants to have. Thud, thud, thud. From somewhere in the compound, the sound of construction. A new storage building at the edge of the complex, replacing one that has become too small for the increased volume of tribute arriving from the expanding network. The construction crew is small, local, working without urgency, the thud of the mallets slow and steady in the morning air. She listens to it from the inner chamber with a satisfaction that she recognizes when she notices it as uncomplicated. The pure, simple satisfaction of a thing working the way it is supposed to work. Of the network that was fracturing on the day she sat across from the council for the first time, now being healthy enough that its storage requirements have outgrown the buildings that were adequate when she arrived. She breathes in the morning air, wood-scented from the construction, layered over the familiar cedar and incense of the palace interior. She breathes out. This is what the long, quiet years sound like. Not silence exactly. The sound of ordinary things happening at the right pace, in the right order. The sound of a world that has found not perfection, but equilibrium. The sound of enough. Sink down into the ordinary morning of the established rain. Sink down into the thud of the construction and the murmur of the meetings and the settled, efficient rhythm of a palace that has found its pace. The grain stores are full. The roads are maintained. The network is talking. And the oracle is breathing in the center of it, present and unremarkable, the way a center should be. Just breathe. Just rest. The ordinary is its own kind of gift, and the rhythm holds everything. Listen. Listen to the sound of a life lived between the great moments. The great moments are not frequent. This is something that the stories do not prepare you for. The stories of queens and oracles and the holders of significant authority tend to move from significant event to significant event, compressing the time between them into a brief transitional phrase. And then several months passed, and then the following year, as if the time between the notable things is simply the container for the notable things, rather than a thing in itself. But the time between the notable things is most of the time. Most of the time is the small hours. Creak, settle, creak. It is mid-afternoon in the middle of a week, in the middle of a season, in the middle of a year. Nothing particular is happening. The morning meetings are done. The afternoon meetings will not begin for another hour. The pre-dawn practice is hours in the past. The treasury visit is hours in the future. This is the window, the unscheduled space, the time that belongs within the architecture of the day to no particular purpose. She is sitting in the inner chamber, not practicing, not thinking about governance, not reading the silk curtain for information or listening to the drums for signals. She is watching a spider. It is in the upper corner of the room, where the right-hand wall meets the ceiling. A small spider, brown and precise, the kind that appears in cedar buildings in the middle of the dry season and disappears again when the rains come. It is building, not quickly, with the specific, unhurried confidence of a creature that is doing exactly what it is built to do and is not distracted from it by anything. Spin, pause, spin, move, spin, pause. She watches it with the quality of attention she usually reserves for the pre-dawn practice, without urgency, without reaching, simply present with the small, precise, entirely self-contained activity of a creature making its home in the corner of her room. This is one of the small hours, and it is, she has discovered, one of the necessary ones. Inhale, and the afternoon is still. Exhale, and the spider continues. The question she is most often asked, in the formal language of the court and the informal language of the brothers' evening reports, is what she needs, what resources, what information, what support. The question is always oriented toward the work, and she answers it in those terms, because those are the terms available. But what she needs in the small hours is this: the spider. The afternoon light moving through the cedar planks in its slow, angular progression across the floor. The sound of the construction faint and rhythmic in the background, not requiring her attention. The smell of the palace in mid-afternoon, warmer than the morning and the evening, the cedar releasing a faint, resinous warmth that is the closest thing to the smell of a summer forest that the inside of a building can produce. She needs to not be the queen for an hour. Not in the sense of setting down the responsibility. She has understood for a long time that the responsibility does not have a set-down position. It is present in the small hours the same way it is present in the meetings, quietly, in the background, not demanding attention but not absent either. The network is out there, continuing its patient business. The grain stores are at their current level. The roads are in their current condition. All of this continues without requiring her continuous, active awareness. She needs to not perform the queen for an hour, to inhabit the room without the posture, to breathe without the quality of attention being a tool she is deploying, to watch the spider and find the watching itself to be sufficient. Not practice, not information, just the spider and the afternoon light and the warm cedar smell and the distant, reliable thud of the construction. Spin, pause, spin. The spider has reached the far corner of its construction. It pauses. It seems to assess the work so far. Then it turns and begins the return journey, laying down the next thread, the geometry of the web emerging from the accumulated pattern of individual decisions that are each, individually, simple. She watches it and thinks, briefly and without pressure, that the web and the network have something in common. Not the shape exactly, the principle. Every node connected to every other node through the accumulated threads of individual exchanges, each thread individually simple, the whole thing, seen from the right distance, a pattern of unexpected elegance. She smiles, briefly, to herself. The spider does not know it has been compared to the political geography of the Yamatai. The spider does not know anything except the next thread. This is the other thing the small hours give her, the perspective that is not available in the meetings, the view from a slight distance that reveals the pattern in things that, close up, appear to be just the next thread. Inhale, and the afternoon holds. Exhale, and the spider works. The construction sound has stopped. The crew breaking for their midday meal, the thud of the mallets replaced by the quieter, more varied sounds of people at rest. Murmur, low laughter, the sound of ceramic vessels being set down on packed earth, the sounds of the ordinary life of the compound, going about its business in the warm middle of the day. She listens to it without organizing it, just receives it, the way the mirror receives the light, without direction, without effort, simply open to what is there. The spider finishes a section, moves to a new position. The web is taking shape, still partial, still incomplete by the standards of what it will eventually be, but already holding the logic of its finished form in the pattern of what has been built so far. She breathes in the warm cedar smell of the afternoon. She breathes out. In an hour, the afternoon meetings will begin. The grain administrator will come, and the road commissioner, and the representative from the eastern provinces who is visiting this week. She will sit in the posture of the oracle. She will receive the information through the silk curtain. She will respond with the calibrated honesty that the work requires. She will be the queen. But right now, in this hour, she is watching a spider build its web in the corner of her room. And the watching is enough. The watching is, in fact, everything. Sink down into the small hours. Sink down into the warm cedar afternoon and the spider and the distant sounds of the compound at rest. The meetings will come. The practice will come. The treasury visit will come. The work will continue as it always continues, patient and necessary and sustainable. But right now, there is only this: the spider, the light, the warm cedar smell, the breathing. Just breathe. Just rest. The small hours are the real ones, and the spider is still building. Listen. Listen to the sound of a life resuming itself. It is autumn, the particular autumn of the Yamatai plain, which is gentler than the spring and more melancholy than the summer, and carries in its specific quality of light and air the particular annual reminder that everything that grew this season is in the process of becoming something else. The rice has been harvested. The paddies are drained and grey now, their flat surfaces reflecting the low, thin sky of the late season. The cedar grove at the edge of the compound has not changed its colour, cedar being cedar. But the trees at the perimeter of the grove, the deciduous ones at its edges, are beginning the slow, reliable process of release. She has been the queen for 6 years. She realized this yesterday, in the middle of a routine morning meeting, without any particular occasion for the realization. The grain administrator was speaking, his careful voice delivering the seasonal numbers, and she was receiving them in the usual way. And then, between one breath and the next, she understood that she has been doing this for 6 years. That she was 13 when the council met and she said yes. And now she is 19. And the 6 years between those two numbers is the whole of her adult life. And most of what she knows of the world she learned inside these cedar walls, from behind this silk curtain, in the pre-dawn dark of this inner chamber. The grain administrator finished his report. She responded appropriately. He withdrew, and she sat for the rest of the morning with the 6 years sitting in her lap. Not heavy exactly, but present, undeniable. The way a significant fact is undeniable once you have allowed yourself to fully notice it. Inhale, and the autumn air is cool and faintly sweet. Exhale, and the 6 years breathe with it. That evening, she did something she had not done in a very long time. She went outside. Not to the outer compound, not to the administrative areas of the palace complex. Outside, through the back gate, the one that opens onto the path along the edge of the cedar grove, used by the maintenance staff in the early morning, and almost never used by anyone at other times. She told the senior maiden where she was going. She went alone. The path along the cedar grove in autumn is soft underfoot. The fallen needles of previous seasons have accumulated into a deep, rust-colored carpet that gives under each step with a faint, dry compression. Scuff, cushion, scuff, cushion. The smell is extraordinary. The live cedar above and the decaying cedar below, and the cool autumn air moving between them, carrying the complex, layered, deep green smell of a healthy grove in the season of release. She walked slowly, very slowly, not because she was in any hurry to return, because the walking itself was so much more than she had been allowing herself. The specific, physical, unrepeatable sensation of feet on ground that is not the floor of the inner chamber. The feel of the cool air on her face without the mediation of a wall or a curtain. The sound of the grove around her. Its own deep, multi-layered sound of living things adjusting to the afternoon. Shh. The grove breathes. Shh. She walked to the point where the path turns away from the grove and opens onto the edge of the plain. She stopped there. The plain was in front of her, wide and grey gold in the autumn light. The harvested paddies stretching away to the dark line of the mountains. The sky was enormous. She had forgotten how enormous the sky is when there is no ceiling between you and it. The inner chamber sky, the suggestion of light through the cedar planks, is a different thing entirely from this. This is the actual sky. Wide and pale and thin, and going on forever in every direction above the flat, patient surface of the plain. She stood there for a long time. She did not practice. She did not deploy the quality of attention. She simply stood on the edge of the plain in the autumn light, with the sky above her and the harvested paddies in front of her, and the cedar grove breathing behind her, and let herself be a 19-year-old person standing outside. A crane crossed the sky, high up, moving from east to west with the slow, absolute confidence of a bird that knows exactly where it is going and has no particular concern about the time it takes to get there. She watched it until it was gone. Murmur, rustle, settle. The grove behind her, adjusting to some small shift in the air. A branch, a falling needle. The micro sounds of a living system going about its business without reference to the human standing at its edge. She thought about the 6 years, not analyzing them, not assessing them, just allowing them to be present with her in the autumn air on the edge of the plain. The meetings and the decisions and the drums and the gathering and the delegation from the way and the treasury evenings and the spider in the corner of the inner chamber and the pre-dawn practices and the bones and the fire and the elders tap, tap, tap in the corridor. All of it. 6 years of all of it. In the body of a person standing outside for the first time in longer than she can precisely remember, watching the sky where the crane was and is no longer. Inhale, and the plain breathes with her. Exhale, and the 6 years settle. She felt something release. Not the responsibility, not the authority, something smaller and more personal than those. The tight, barely conscious holding that she had not known was there until it let go. The particular tension of someone who has been very good at their job for a long time, and who has been, in the process of being very good at their job, slightly too continuously good at it. Too continuous in the application, too present in the work. The plain does not know this about her. The sky does not care. The cedar grove is entirely indifferent to the political situation of the Yamatai. And this, she realizes, is precisely what she needed. Not the advice of the elder, not the information of the brother, not the frequency of the pre-dawn practice, the indifference of the plain, the enormous, patient, absolute indifference of a world that is simply there, doing its seasonal business, not requiring anything of her at all. She breathed in the autumn plain. She breathed out. She stood there until the light was almost gone, and the mountains had become dark shapes against a sky that was moving through the last of the amber and into the first of the indigo. Then she walked back along the cedar path. Scuff, cushion, scuff, cushion, through the back gate, into the compound, into the palace, into the corridor that leads to the inner chamber, through the silk curtain, into the lamp-lit, familiar air of cedar and incense, and the specific, particular, entirely personal smell of the room she has been living inside for 6 years. She sat down. She placed her hands in her lap. She breathed. The oracle was back. The queen was back. 6 years in and still here, still breathing, still present, with the autumn plain still in her lungs, and the crane still crossing the sky behind her eyes, and the cedar path still soft under her feet. She was not just the queen tonight. She was also the person who had stood on the edge of the plain and watched the crane cross the sky and felt the cold, sweet autumn air on her face, and been, briefly and entirely and without apology, just a 19-year-old person standing outside. Both things at the same time, without contradiction. Sink down into the autumn evening of the returning. Sink down into the cedar path and the crane and the enormous sky and the tight thing releasing and the lamp-lit inner chamber receiving her back. The 6 years are present and accounted for. The plain has been witnessed. The sky has been enormous, and the oracle is breathing in the center of the room with the autumn still in her, and the work waiting quietly, as it always waits, for morning. Good night. Just breathe. The plane will be there tomorrow. The crane has found its way, and the autumn holds you, gently, all the way into the dark. Listen. Listen to the sound of someone who has stopped counting the years. It happens gradually. The way the mound grows gradually, one basket of soil at a time, until one morning you look up and realize the profile against the sky is different from what it was, and you cannot say precisely when it changed, because the changing was the sum of 1,000 individual moments, none of which was the moment. The years have been passing in their ordinary way, season by season, harvest by harvest, the plane cycling through its patient rotations. And somewhere in that cycling, the girl became something else. Not a different person, the same person, but settled into herself the way old cedar settles into its grain, the way the mound settles into the landscape. Still itself, more itself than it was before, denser, quieter, more at home in the space it occupies. She's in her mid-20s now. The chronicles do not record this precisely, because the chronicles record events rather than ages, and her mid-20s are not an event. They are a quality. The quality of a rain that has found its permanent shape. The quality of an oracle who has been practicing the pre-dawn hour for more than a decade, and who has reached the place where the practice is no longer something she does, but something she is. The frequency is not something she finds anymore. It is something she inhabits. Scuff, bow, murmur. The morning continues. The meetings have a different quality now. She noticed it first in the officials. The way they speak to the brother has changed over the years. Less performative. Less careful in the way that people are careful when they are uncertain how their message will be received. More direct. The directness of people who have delivered many messages to this particular oracle, and who have learned, through the accumulated experience of those deliveries, that precision is valued here, and elaboration is not necessary. The network has learned her. This is the thing that took the longest. Longer than the drums stopping. Longer than the way delegation. Longer than the treasury evenings and the spider and the autumn on the edge of the plain. The network learning her. The 100 chiefdoms and their messengers, and their grain deliveries, and their road reports, and their seasonal visits developing, through years of repeated contact with the same center, the same oracle, the same quality of response, an understanding of her that is not personal exactly, but is also not impersonal, something in between. The understanding that a musician develops for a particular instrument, the understanding that a farmer develops for a particular field. They know her rhythms now, the timing of her responses, the kinds of information she asks for when she asks for more, the specific quality of the silence that precedes a decision that will require effort from them, as distinct from the silence that precedes a decision that will not. They have learned to read her the way she reads the silk curtain, not perfectly, but well enough that the exchange of information and authority and reciprocity that holds the network together moves with a smoothness that it did not have in the first years. Inhale, and the years breathe through the network. Exhale, and the smoothness holds. The elder died 2 winters ago, quietly, in her room at the eastern end of the palace. The tap, tap, tap in the corridor stopped, and after a day, it became clear that it had stopped permanently, and the palace absorbed this the way it absorbs everything, by continuing. By the next morning's footsteps beginning their ordinary round without the elders among them. By the maintenance of the rhythms that the elder had been part of for so long that her absence from them was itself a kind of presence. She sat with it for several days, not grieving in the demonstrative way, in the interior way, the way she sits with everything that is significant, allowing the loss its full weight without performing it, feeling the specific, irreplaceable shape of the absence, the tap, tap, tap that was always there in the corridors of her awareness, that she had stopped consciously noticing years ago because it was so reliably present, and that was now, suddenly and permanently, not there. She went to the treasury. She held the mirrors. She spoke in the interior voice to both of them, to Himiko and to the elder together. She said, "I am going to miss her every day." She said, "I think I already knew everything she was going to teach me." She said, "I think she knew that too." She said, "Thank you." The bronze was patient and cold and dim in the lamplight, as it always is, as it always will be. Tap, tap, tap. Gone. The corridor is quiet. She carries the elder in the practice now, in the quality of the pre-dawn hour, in the way she reads the bone, in the tap, tap, tap that she sometimes hears, not in the corridor, but in the interior. The teacher continuing in the taught, which is the only continuation that matters. The brother is older too. The hair at his temples has gone entirely grey. His voice has deepened slightly with the years, the upper registers of it settling into a lower, warmer frequency that carries in its texture the specific, worn quality of a voice that has been used carefully and consistently for a long time. He is, in the way of people who have been doing an important job well for many years, very good at it. Better than he was. The best version of what he has always been. She relies on him completely. Not in the way of dependence, in the way of partnership. The deep, functional, entirely mutual reliance of two people who have been doing complementary work in the same institution for a long time, and who understand each other so well that the communication between them has simplified itself over the years to the essential. Together they hold the center, and the center holds. Sink down into the mid-decade morning of the established reign. Sink down into the smoothness and the learned rhythms and the elder in the practice and the brother's grey-templed reliability and the network that has learned the oracle and the oracle who has learned the network. The weight is familiar now, not lighter, familiar. The difference is everything. Just breathe. Just rest. The center is holding, and the familiar weight is carrying you as much as you are carrying it. Listen. Listen to the sound of peace arriving without announcement. There is a question she used to ask in the pre-dawn practice. In the early years, the first and second and third years of the reign, it was there almost every morning, sitting at the edge of the practice like a stone at the edge of a path. Not obstructing exactly, present, requiring acknowledgement before she could move past it. The question was, am I doing this right? Not the governance, not the decisions. Those questions had practical answers, available through the information that came through the silk curtain and the quality of the network's response to the decisions she made. The other question, the deeper one, the one about the frequency and the mirrors and the bone and the practice, and whether she was the person this role required, or whether she was a 13-year-old girl who said yes when she should have said, I don't know, and has been trying to compensate for that ever since. That question was present for a long time. Creak, settle, creak, the pre-dawn palace. She cannot say exactly when it stopped. She noticed its absence before she noticed the process of its leaving. One morning, several years ago now, she realized that the stone at the edge of the path was not there, that the pre-dawn hour had, at some point in the preceding weeks or months, become simply the pre-dawn hour, the practice without the question attached to it, the breathing without the assessment of the breathing, the frequency, when it came, without the monitoring of whether it was the right frequency or the correct quality or sufficient evidence that she was doing this right. It had simply stopped. Inhale, and the pre-dawn is clean. Exhale, and the practice breathes. She sat with the absence of the question, the way she sat with the elder's absence, allowing it its full shape, not rushing to fill the space it left with something else. The space it left was not an emptiness. It was a clearing. The specific, airy openness of a room from which something that was taking up space has been removed, not because it was unwanted, but because it had served its purpose and was ready to go. The question served its purpose. For years it kept her honest. It kept her from the particular, corrosive confidence of someone who has been in authority for long enough to mistake familiarity for mastery. It kept her reaching, kept her uncertain in the productive way, the way that the bone over the fire is uncertain about where the crack will come, not paralyzed by the uncertainty, honest about it. But there is another kind of honesty available on the other side of the question. The honesty of having done the work for long enough that the work and the worker have become, if not the same thing, then deeply and genuinely continuous. The honesty of a practice that has sunk below the level of conscious effort. The honesty of a mirror that has been positioned in the right place for so long that the adjusting is done, and what remains is only the reflecting. She is not certain she is doing this right. She has simply stopped needing the certainty. The need for it has been replaced by something quieter and more useful. The simple, practical, daily evidence of the network functioning. The grain moving. The roads maintained. The tributary relationships stable. The drums silent. The plain, ordinary and patient and wide. Thud, 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 distant, the rhythm of an ordinary day. There are other questions she has stopped asking. The question of what Himiko would have done, which occupied her considerably in the first years, has quietly retired. Not because the question was wrong, because she is no longer Himiko doing this. She is herself doing this. The mirror she uses is her own now, worn smooth by her particular hands, angled to catch the specific light of her specific position. It reflects differently from the way Himiko's mirrors reflected. Not better or worse, different. The difference of a particular person in a particular time, doing the best version of themselves available. The question of what comes after her has also quieted, not disappeared. She is not incurious about the continuation of the Yamatai, the political structures that are forming in the decades of her reign that will outlast her. But the urgency has gone from it. The question has settled from a source of anxiety into a source of attention. She notices things now with this question in her peripheral awareness. The particular capabilities of the younger officials coming up through the administrative structure, the changing shape of the tributary relationships as the network matures, the way the Yamato plain is filling in around the political structures of the Yamatai, with more settlements and more roads, and more of the accumulated human intervention in the landscape that will, eventually, become something larger than the Yamatai as she knows it. She tends it, not controls it, tends it, the way you tend a garden that is going to outlive you. Inhale, and the tending continues. Exhale, and the garden grows. This is the thing that the questions were covering. Underneath all the asking, underneath the, am I doing this right? And the, what would Himiko have done? And the, what comes after? There was this. The work itself, the plane itself, the network itself, doing what it does, growing in the directions available to it, shaped by the quality of the attention given to it, patient, seasonal, larger than any individual decision, but made of individual decisions all the way down. She breathes in the pre-dawn dark of the inner chamber. She breathes out. The frequency is there. It is always there. She is always here. These two facts have become, over the years, the same fact. Sink down into the quiet of the questions stopped. Sink down into the clean pre-dawn air, and the practice without the assessment, and the work without the anxiety, and the rain settling into the shape that it has always been growing toward. The stone is gone from the edge of the path. The path continues, and the walking is lighter now. Just breathe. Just rest. The questions have done their work, and the piece that remains is the real thing. Listen. Listen to the sound of a legacy forming without being intended. She does not think of it as a legacy. Legacy is a word for looking backward, and she is still looking forward. still in the middle of the ordinary work of the ordinary mornings, still receiving the reports through the silk curtain and responding and tending the network and sitting in the pre-dawn dark. She is not finished. She does not know when she will be finished. She does not spend time thinking about when she will be finished. But something is visible if you step back far enough to see it. Something that has been assembling itself from the accumulated material of the years. Scuff, murmur, the network breathes. The roads between the Yamatai and the nearest chiefdoms are better than they were when she became queen. Not dramatically better, incrementally better. The result of years of the road commissioner's requests being heard and funded, and the resulting maintenance being applied, and the resulting roads being used, and the resulting use generating information about which sections need the most attention next season. The roads are better because attention was paid to them consistently over many years, without drama. The grain storage capacity of the network has increased. Not just at the Yamatai, at the tributary settlements as well, where the knowledge of better storage techniques, shared through the exchange of information that the gathering began, and the regular seasonal visits have continued, has allowed communities to maintain larger reserves and weather the bad harvest years with less disruption. The network is more resilient than it was, because resilience was attended to, quietly, over time. The children of the chieftains who came to the first gathering, the ones who were restless teenagers in the back of the hall while their parents sat in the circle and spoke of their fears, are now the ones making the seasonal visits. They grew up in the era of the stable Yamatai. They have no personal memory of the drums, or the fracturing tributary relationships, or the failed king. What they know is this: a center that is reliable, an oracle that is consistent, a network that functions. This is their normal. They will carry it forward not as a political achievement, but as the condition of the world as they have always known it. Inhale, and the inheritance moves forward. Exhale, and the shape holds. She thinks sometimes about the way chronicle that will record her reign, the handful of sentences. She's made peace with the handful of sentences. In the early years, there was something in her that wanted more than a handful of sentences. Not from vanity, from the feeling that the work deserved more than a handful of sentences, that the drums and the gathering and the mirrors and the pre-dawn practices and the elders tap, 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 and the spider and the autumn plain and the 6 years and the 10 years and all the ordinary mornings of all the ordinary days deserved more than what a handful of sentences can hold. But she has come to understand something about the handful of sentences. The sentences record the event. Iyo, 13 years old, installed as queen. The wars stopped. A delegation was sent to the way. These are the facts that the chronicle can hold. But the chronicle cannot hold the quality of the work that produced those facts. The chronicle cannot hold the pre-dawn breathing, or the stone at the edge of the path, or the crane crossing the autumn sky. The chronicle cannot hold any of the actual substance of a life. No chronicle can. Not the Wazy. Not any chronicle. The actual substance of a life is not available to the written record. It lives in other places. In the roads that are a little better. In the grain stores that are a little larger. In the children of the chieftains who grew up knowing a reliable centre and will carry that knowledge forward into whatever comes next. In the practice, continuing in those who received it, in the quality of the attention, transmitted through the accumulated interactions of years, shaping the network in ways that will outlast any individual record of the shaping. The legacy is in the soil, the way all the real legacies are. Thud, thud, thud. The construction at the edge of the compound, always building, always adding. She breathes in the familiar cedar air of the inner chamber. She breathes out. The network is out there, breathing its own breath, doing its seasonal business, carrying forward the accumulated quality of the years of tending. The plain is wide and patient and old. The mountains are watching from the horizon with the same geological indifference they have always brought to the human activities on the plain below. She is part of all of this now, not as an authority, as a feature. The way the mound becomes a feature of the landscape, the way the path through the cedar grove becomes a feature of the grove, the way anything that has been in a place long enough and tended it carefully enough becomes, eventually, part of the place itself. She has become part of the plain, part of the network, part of the long, patient, unglamorous, absolutely essential tradition of people who sat in the center and breathed and received and responded and went on doing so, day after day, season after season, year after year, until the doing and the being became the same thing. Sink down into the shape of what was built. Sink down into the better roads and the larger stores, and the children who grew up knowing a reliable centre, and the practice continuing in those who received it, and the quality of the attention embedded in the network like the layers of the mound. She built this without intending to build it, by simply doing the work well, for long enough, with enough consistency and enough honesty, and enough willingness to be present. It is enough. It has always been enough. It is, in fact, more than enough. It is everything. Good night. Just breathe. The shape is holding. The plane is keeping you. And the work continues in the hands that received it, as it always has, as it always will. Listen. Listen to the sound of history deciding what to keep. It is not a dramatic sound. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with the crack of the oracle bone or the thud of the tamping mallet, or the dry, decisive percussion of a political decision being made in a lamplit room. It is quieter than any of those things. It is the sound of a brush moving across a surface, and then stopping, and the stopping being the significant part. Scratch, 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 stop. The way G is being compiled somewhere on the continent, in the administrative offices of an empire so large that the Yamatai is a peripheral notation in its records, a small entry in the section on the eastern peoples across the water. The scholars who compile it are careful men, thorough men, men who take their responsibility to the record seriously, and who understand that the chronicle, once written, becomes the reality. That the things recorded will be remembered, and the things not recorded will, with the passage of enough time, cease to have happened in any recoverable sense. They record what they have, the reports of the delegations, the formal correspondence, the accounts of the officials who made the crossing and attended the receptions and delivered the tribute and received the gifts and returned to the continent with their written observations folded into the administrative correspondence of the imperial apparatus. And what they have for Iyo is a handful of sentences. Scratch, scratch, stop. She does not know this is happening. She is in the inner chamber, in the middle of an ordinary morning, receiving the reports of the grain administrator through the silk curtain. She has no knowledge of the compilation of the chronicle, no awareness that somewhere on the continent a brush is moving across a surface and making permanent, in the formal script of the imperial court, the small, precise record of her existence. A name, an age, the wars stopped, a delegation was sent. That is what the brush keeps. Everything else it moves past. The pre-dawn practices, unrecorded. The gathering after the drums, unrecorded. The treasury evenings and the 5 mirrors in their lacquered boxes, unrecorded. The spider in the corner of the inner chamber, unrecorded. The autumn on the edge of the plain, unrecorded. The elders tap, 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 unrecorded. The question she stopped asking, unrecorded. The peace that arrived without announcement, unrecorded. All of it, unrecorded. Inhale, and the brush moves on. Exhale, and the record closes. This is not the fault of the chroniclers. They recorded what was available to them, which was the external shape of the political relationship between the Wei and the Wa, the tribute, the delegations, the formal acknowledgements, the visible surface of a rain, the part of the iceberg above the water. The part below the water is not available to chronicles. It is not available to any record. It lives in other places, in the ways that the real substance of lives always lives, in the quality of the attention given to a thing, in the shape of what grows in the presence of a particular kind of tending, in the people who were near it and who carry something of it forward in the way they move through the world. But those things do not travel well across centuries. They attenuate. They transform. They become unrecognizable as what they were, and eventually they become invisible. Not gone, invisible. The way the mound becomes invisible when the grass has grown over it, and the generations that knew it was a mound have been replaced by generations that simply walk across the slight rise in the ground without thinking about why it is there. Scratch, scratch, stop. The chronicle is complete. The brush has moved on to the next entry, the next peripheral notation in the records of the great empire. The Yamatai has had its handful of sentences. The brush has given it what it has, and it is enough for the purposes of the chronicle. It preserves the external fact of the existence, the name, the age, the political significance. Everything else the chronicle is not equipped to hold. Breathe in the particular quality of that truth. It is not a sad truth exactly. It is a factual one. The honest acknowledgement of what records can do and cannot do. What the written word preserves and what it cannot reach. The specific, clarifying honesty of understanding that the most important things are always unrecordable. Not because they are too large, but because they are too real, too embedded in the texture of lived experience to survive the translation into marks on a surface. She is living the unrecordable part right now. Breathing. Present. In the center of the ordinary morning, receiving the grain administrator's report through the silk curtain, responding with the calibrated honesty that the work requires. Alive in the moment in a way that no chronicle can capture, because the moment, by definition, is gone before the brush reaches the surface. Sink down into the silence of the unrecorded. Sink down into the pre-dawn practices and the treasury evenings and the spider and the crane and the autumn plane and all the 10,000 ordinary mornings that the brush moved past. They are not less real for being unrecorded. They are, in fact, more real. The chronicle is the shadow. The mornings are the thing. Just breathe. Just rest. The record has what it has, and the real thing is here, breathing, in the dark. Listen. Listen to the sound of memory thinning. Time is passing now in a different way. Not the ordinary, seasonal, patient time of the rain. The longer time. The time that moves not in harvests but in generations. The time in which the people who knew her, who were present in the palace during the years of her authority, who received the reports through the silk curtain and walked the cedar corridors and heard the elders tap, 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 are growing old and then being replaced by people who did not know her and who know of her only through the accounts of those who did, and the accounts thin. This is what always happens. The first generation remembers directly. The second generation remembers what the first generation told them, which is already a different thing, already filtered through the particular compressions and emphases of storytelling. The third generation has a memory of a memory. By the fourth generation, the living connection to the specific person in the specific room is essentially gone. What remains is the outline, the shape, the name, if the name was significant enough. Iyo, Toyo, the girl who was queen, the one after Himiko. Murmur, fade, murmur. In the settlements of the network, the stories of her reign are already becoming the texture of the background rather than the foreground. The chieftains whose parents attended the gathering after the drums remember the gathering as a story their parents told. Their children will remember it as a story their parents told about a story their grandparents told. By the time their children's children are born, the gathering will be, if it is remembered at all, a general sense that there was once a difficult time that was resolved by a queen whose name was something like Iyo. Something like Iyo. She would not be distressed by this. She understood, sitting in the inner chamber with the cold air of the treasury and the dim bronze of the mirrors, that the actual substance of a life does not travel in names. She understood that the legacy is in the soil, in the roads and the storage techniques, and the quality of the political relationships that the tending produced. The name is a convenience, a handle, useful for the short term, dispensable in the long, but the name almost disappeared entirely. Inhale, and the centuries move. Exhale, and the memory thins. The chronicles of the way survive. They survive the way that the bronze mirrors survive, slowly oxidizing in the dark of various archives, their surfaces tarnishing, their content becoming harder to read, but the essential structure intact. The Weiji survives, with its handful of sentences about Iyo, preserved in the administrative records of an empire that fell and was replaced, and whose records were copied and recopied through the centuries by scholars who understood that the record was worth keeping, even when the empire that produced it was gone. The Japanese records are thinner. The writing system arrived late to the archipelago. The earliest Japanese chronicles, the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, are compiled centuries after Iyo's reign, from oral traditions and earlier fragmentary records that have themselves been filtered through the political needs of the courts that commissioned them. They contain Himiko. She is there, in various forms, in the mythology and the semi-historical accounts of the early centuries. The figure of the great queen, the oracle, the bridge between the worlds, is too significant to disappear entirely from the memory of the culture she helped to shape. But Iyo is harder to find. She is in the Weiji and almost nowhere else. The indigenous tradition, the accumulated memory of the archipelago itself, has thinned her almost to invisibility. Almost. Scratch. Scratch. Pause. There are scholars who look for her, not in the large archival sense, in the quiet, specific, patient way of people who are interested in the particular shape of a particular absence, who notice that the Weiji's handful of sentences point to a person of significant historical weight who is not proportionally represented in the Japanese record, who ask what that disproportion means, who follow the question into the specific, difficult, provisional work of reconstructing from fragments a presence that the record has not adequately kept. They find things. Not much. Enough. A name that may be her in a passage of the Nihon Shoki, embedded in a genealogy, the connection uncertain but possible. A pattern of political development in the mid-3rd century that makes more sense in the presence of a stabilizing authority than in its absence. The shape of the thing that was held together, visible in the record, even when the holder of it is not. She is in the negative space, in the outline of what was maintained, in the borders of the absence. The scholars who look for her understand something that the chronicles missed, that a person can be more present in what they prevented than in what they caused, that the war that did not happen leaves a different kind of trace than the war that did. Quieter, less visible, but there, for those patient enough to look for it. Breathe in the particular, patient quality of the scholarly search, the slow, careful, provisional work of reconstruction from fragments, the honesty required to say, this is what we know, this is what we think. This is where the record ends and the inference begins. The willingness to hold the absence of evidence and the evidence of absence as different things, and to be rigorous about which is which. She deserves that rigor. Not because she was famous, because she was real, because she breathed and decided and tended and failed and recovered and grew and became the land in the quiet, unremarkable, entirely unglamorous way that real people become real things. And the real things deserve the effort of being found, even when the finding is partial, even when the record is thin, even when almost all that remains is the name. something like Iyo. Sink down into the thinning memory. Sink down into the centuries passing, and the record growing sparse, and the scholars in their quiet archives following the shape of the absence. She is there. She has always been there. The record is thin, but the thing it is recording is not. The plane does not forget. The soil does not forget. And the ones who look carefully enough will find the outline of her in the borders of what was held together. Just breathe. Just rest. The search continues, and the absence is its own kind of record. Listen. Listen to the sound of the earth being more reliable than the archive. The plane is still there. The same plane. The Yamatai plain, with its wide, flat, mineral patience, its mountains on every horizon, its rivers finding their way to the sea. The paddies that Iyo looked out at from the edge of the cedar grove on the autumn afternoon when she went outside for the first time in longer than she could precisely remember, are still there, drained and planted and harvested in their annual cycle. The same cycle they have been performing since before the Yamatai existed, and that they will continue performing long after the specific political arrangements of the 3rd century are beyond anyone's power to reconstruct. The plane does not know about the Weiji. It does not know about the handful of sentences. It does not know about the scholars in their archives following the shape of the absence. The plane simply continues, patient, seasonal, holding everything it was given in the only way it knows how to hold things, which is by becoming it, by incorporating it into the layers of itself, by keeping it in the soil. Shh, the grass moves. Shh. There are mounds on this plain, some of them from her era, the modest, practical burial mounds of the Yamatai and its network, built without the colossal ambition of the great Kawachi keystones, but with the same fundamental intention, the same language of earth and commitment, and the deliberate human modification of the landscape in the service of the belief that the dead deserve a permanent place in the world of the living. The mounds are still there, grass-covered now, their profiles softened by 17 centuries of rain and root and the slow, patient chemistry of the soil. They look like hills. They look like features of the natural landscape. They are both of those things and neither of those things. They are the marks of people on a landscape, preserved by the landscape itself in the only archive that does not burn and does not flood and does not require a successor to copy it before it decays. Tap, tap, tap. The archaeologists trowel on the soil at the edge of the excavation. The same sound as the elder's walking stick on the cedar floor. The same patient, deliberate percussion of careful attention applied to the specific. The excavation is a small one, near the edge of what the scholars believe was the outer compound of the Yamatai, the area where the storage buildings and the administrative offices and the quarters of the officials were clustered in the 3rd century. The work is slow. It is always slow. The slower, the better. Scrape, brush, scrape. The trowel reveals a post hole, a dark stain in the pale soil, circular, perhaps 30 centimeters across. The trace of a wooden post that stood here 17 centuries ago and has long since returned to the earth that now holds the memory of its shape. The post was part of a building. The building was part of the compound. The compound was the Yamatai. She was in this compound. Not in this specific post hole, not in this specific building, but in this ground. Her footsteps were on this soil, compressed into the top layer of it, incorporated into the stratigraphy of the site over the centuries as the layers accumulated above them. Her footsteps are in there somewhere, below the post hole, below the layers of the intervening centuries. Compressed, yes, unrecognizable as footsteps, but there. Inhale, and the soil holds everything. Exhale, and the layers breathe. The archaeologist photographs the post hole. She records its dimensions and its depth, and its relationship to the other features of the excavation in her notebook. The careful, systematic description of someone who understands that what she is writing now will become part of the record. That the record is being built, right now, in this moment, from the evidence that the plane has kept in the only way it knows how. The post hole is a sentence, shorter than the handful of sentences in the way G, but in its own way more intimate. The post hole is not about Iyo. It does not record her name or her age or the wars stopping. It records the physical fact of the compound that contained her, the specific, material reality of the place where she breathed and decided and tended and became the land. It is a sentence in a different language than the chronicle, the language of the soil. Slower, more patient, more willing to wait for the right reader. She is in this language, distributed through the layers of the site, in the post holes and the fire pits and the ceramic fragments and the pollen record of the plants that grew in the compound in the 3rd century, in the microscopic traces of organic material in the floor deposits of the buildings, in the particular layered stratigraphy of a site that was occupied continuously for long enough that the occupation is visible in the soil as a distinct layer, darker and richer than the layers above and below it. The plane kept her, in the only way it can keep anything, by incorporating her into itself, by making her part of the record that is not a record, the archive that is not an archive, the memory that does not require a scholar to copy it before it fades. Breathe in the excavation air, cold and mineral and complex, the smell of the deep past returning to the surface, the smell of the soil giving back what it was given, slowly, in fragments, in post holes and ceramic shards and dark stains in the pale clay, in the partial, provisional, honest, and entirely sufficient evidence of a life that was lived here, in this ground, in this plain, under this same patient sky. She is in the soil. She has always been in the soil. Shh. The grass moves over the mound. Shh. The excavation continues. The trowel moves. The brush follows. The record is being built from the ground up, in the language that the plain speaks, in the sentences that the soil has been composing for 17 centuries. It is not the way-je. It is not the handful of sentences. It is something older and more patient and more complete. It is the earth remembering. Sink down into the excavation. sink down into the post holes and the dark stains and the ceramic fragments and the pollen and the microscopic organic traces and the specific, layered, mineral memory of the soil. She is in there, not as a ghost, not as a spirit, as a fact. The undeniable, material, stratigraphic fact of a person who was here, who breathed this air, who walked on this ground, who tended this network and held this center, and became, over the years, part of the plane that held her. Good night. Just breathe. The plane is keeping you. The soil remembers. And the trowel is still moving, patient and careful and honest, building the record from the ground up, one sentence at a time. Listen. Listen to the sound of a morning that does not know it is the last. This is the thing about last mornings. They do not announce themselves. They arrive with the same thin, grey light as every other morning, the same cool air through the cedar planks, the same sound of the palace beginning its daily process of waking, the same smell of the oil lamp burning low after the long night, the same sub-harmonic creak of the timbers as the compound expands in the first warmth of the day. Creak, settle, creak. She has been in this room for a long time now, longer than she was not in it, which is the point at which a place stops being where you live and becomes where you are. The inner chamber is not a room she inhabits. It is a room she has become. The cedar walls know her breathing. The rush mats know the specific pressure of her particular posture. The oil lamp in the corner has been relit for her so many thousands of times that the maiden who tends it does so without thought, the way the body breathes without thought. She is sitting in the pre-dawn dark. The practice is happening, or the practice is simply what she is now, which is the same thing. The breathing, the stillness, the frequency present in the air of the room, the way the cedar smell is present, without beginning and without end, simply the quality of the space she occupies. Inhale, long, all the way. Exhale, slow, all the way. She is not young anymore. The chronicles do not record her age at the end of her reign, because the chronicles do not record the end of her reign, because the chronicles do not record anything of her after the handful of sentences about her beginning. But she is not young. The body that has been sitting in this posture for decades carries its decades in the way bodies do, in the morning stiffness that takes longer to resolve than it used to, in the way the cool air of the pre-dawn feels different against older skin, in the particular, accumulated weight of a face that has been thinking and deciding and receiving and responding for a very long time. But the frequency is the same. It has never changed. It was here on the first morning she touched it, in the amber light of the early evening, when she was too tired to try. It was here through the decades of the practice. It is here now, in the last pre-dawn hour, as present and as patient and as unremarkable as it has always been. She breathes with it, not reaching, not holding, simply breathing in the quality of the presence, the way she has been breathing in it for more years than she can now precisely count. The frequency does not ask anything of her. It never has. It is simply there, and she is simply here. And these two facts have been the bedrock of every morning of her reign. Scuff. Pause. Scuff. A maiden in the outer corridor. The particular footstep of the youngest one, the one who has been with the palace for only 2 years, and whose step still carries the slight self-consciousness of someone who has not yet fully learned to move through a ritual space as if they belong in it. She will learn. She has time. Iyo listens to the young footstep without turning. She listens to it the way she listens to everything now, with the whole of her attention, and without any of the urgency that urgency requires. The footstep passes. The corridor is quiet again. The pre-dawn dark holds everything in its patient, mineral way. She breathes in. She breathes out. She thinks, briefly, without weight, of the girl who sat in this room for the first night of her reign and could not sleep. The 13-year-old with the spine held straight by an effort of will rather than habit. Her hands in her lap, listening to the uncertain footsteps of the officials in the outer corridors and the distant drums from the south and the cedar settling in the nighttime cold. That girl seems, from this distance, both very close and very far. Close because the room is the same room. Far because the distance between that night and this morning is not just years. It is the whole of a life. She does not feel sad about this. She feels the specific, quiet thing that has no simple name. The thing that is not quite gratitude, and not quite completion, and not quite peace, but contains something of all three. The thing that arrives, sometimes, at the end of a very long practice, when you have been doing the same thing for long enough that the doing and the being have become continuous, and you understand, not as a thought, but as a fact in the body, that this is what the time was for. This, the pre-dawn dark, the frequency, the breathing, the plain outside, still and patient in the last of the night. This is what the time was for. Inhale, and the last pre-dawn holds her. Exhale, and the morning begins to come. The light is changing, imperceptibly at first. The absolute indigo of the deep night, thinning by a fraction of a degree at the edges of the cedar planks. The suggestion of the coming dawn arriving before the dawn itself. The way the frequency is present before you can name it. The birds in the cedar grove beginning their first tentative experiments. A single note. Silence. 2 notes. A brief phrase that trails into the quiet and is answered after a moment by another voice from further along the grove. She listens to the birds. She has been listening to these birds, or their ancestors, or the ancestors of their ancestors, every morning of her reign. They have never failed to begin. Not in the cold winters, when the notes are sparse and quickly swallowed by the frost-heavy air. Not in the wet seasons, when the rain is constant and the grove is loud with its own percussion. The birds begin every morning, without uncertainty, without the self-conscious assessment of whether this is the right morning for beginning or whether the beginning will be good enough. They simply begin. She breathes in the first thin light of the coming dawn. The cedar smell is stronger in this light, the warmth of the early sun releasing the resin in a way that the cold of the night does not. She breathes it in completely, all the way she has been breathing it in for all the mornings of all the years. Each morning, its own morning. Each breath, its own breath. The practice never the same twice, and always the same. This morning, like every morning. The last morning, like every morning. Sink down into the pre-dawn of the last ordinary morning. Sink down into the frequency and the birds beginning, and the cedar smell, and the thin light arriving through the planks, and the girl who became the land, still breathing at the center of it all. The palace is waking around her. The plane is waking outside. The network is waking in its hundreds of settlements across the archipelago. And she is here, still here, breathing. Just breathe. Just rest. The morning is coming, and she is ready for it, the way she has always been ready. One breath at a time. Listen. Listen to the sound of something being handed on. It does not happen all at once. Nothing important ever happens all at once. It happens the way the mound is built, one basket at a time, one conversation at a time, one deliberate, unglamorous, unhurried transfer of information and knowledge, and the specific, embodied quality of the practice from the person who has been holding it to the person who will hold it next. She has been doing this for a long time, not formally, not with the ceremony of an official succession announcement or the protocol of a council meeting, in the small, daily, practical way that the real transfers always happen. The way the elder transferred to her, without announcement, through presence, through the accumulated quality of being near something long enough that the quality of it begins to live in you. Scuff, tap, scuff. There is a girl in the palace now, not 13, older, 17, perhaps 18, at the stage of the training where the practice has begun to settle below the level of conscious effort, and the frequency is no longer something she finds, but something she inhabits for portions of the pre-dawn hour. She moves through the corridors with the particular quality of movement that the training produces. Deliberate, unhurried. The movement of someone who has learned that the quality of the moving matters as much as the destination. Iyo knows this movement. She has been watching it develop for years. The way you watch a plant develop when you know what it is going to become. Not with impatience, with the specific, quiet attention of someone who understands that development cannot be accelerated by watching it more intensely. It develops in its own time. The practice knows its own pace. She has been sharing things, in the small hours, in the spaces between the official work. Not teaching in the formal way the elder taught, more lateral than that. The way water finds its way through soil. A conversation about the quality of the pre-dawn silence. An evening in the treasury, the girl present, the mirrors unwrapped, Iyo holding each one in the lamplight and saying nothing, simply allowing the presence of the object and the quality of her own relationship to it to be available to someone who is paying attention. The girl is paying attention. Inhale, and the transmission continues. Exhale, and the practice moves forward. The brother knows. He has always known, in the way that the brother always knows the things that are not formally communicated to him, through the accumulated sensitivity of decades of moving between the oracle and the world. He has begun, subtly, to adjust his own practice, to be slightly more present with the girl during his daily rounds, to deliver certain reports in her vicinity, as well as through the silk curtain, to allow the institutional knowledge of the palace, the rhythms and the protocols, and the specific, functional wisdom of how this particular center works, to be visible to someone who will need to know it. He is preparing, the way he has been doing everything for decades, carefully, without announcement, with the quiet, worn efficiency of someone who understands that the most important work is often the work that happens between the notable events. Murmur. Pause. Murmur. The network is stable. The grain stores are at their seasonal capacity. The roads are in good repair. The tributary relationships have the easy, functional quality of long acquaintance. She has tended this network for decades, and the tending has produced the thing that good tending always produces. A system that is more resilient than the individual who tends it. A web whose nodes maintain their connections, not because the center demands it, but because the connections themselves have become the ordinary condition of the node's existence. The network will not notice immediately. This is the truest measure of how well a center has done its work, not whether the network celebrates it when it is present, but whether the network continues when it is not, whether the roads stay maintained and the grain keeps moving and the tributary messengers keep arriving in their seasonal rhythm, not out of obligation, but out of the deep, accumulated habit of a system that has been functioning well for long enough that functioning well is what it does. She has built something that can continue without her. This is the completion, not the handful of sentences, not the acknowledgement of the way, not the drums that stopped or the delegation that came, or any of the external, recordable events of the rain. This, the network that will keep breathing after she stops, the practice that will continue in the girl with the deliberate footstep in the corridor, the quality of attention that will live in the brother's careful, worn efficiency until it finds its way into whoever comes after him. The passing of the center is not the ending of the center. It is the proof that the center was real. Tap, tap, tap. She hears it for a moment. The elder's walking stick in the corridor, absent for years now, present for a moment in the interior, She smiles. The same smile she has been smiling to herself in the inner chamber for as long as she can remember. Brief, private, sufficient. She breathes in. She breathes out. The girl with the deliberate footstep is in the outer corridor now. Iyo can hear her without trying. The specific, developing quality of that movement, growing more assured each month, less self-conscious, more naturally the expression of what the practice is building inside it. She breathes. The girl breathes. The palace breathes around them both. Inhale, and the practice passes forward. Exhale, and the center continues. This is what it was for. All of it. Every pre-dawn hour, and every bone over the fire, and every treasury evening, and every meeting received through the silk curtain, and every decision calibrated with honesty, and every season tended, and every year added to the total of years. All of it was building toward this. The ability to hand it on. The ability to step back from the center without the center collapsing. The ability to have done the work so thoroughly and so honestly that the work continues in the things and the people it has shaped. She has done that. Quietly. Without announcement. The way she has done everything. Sink down into the passing of the center. Sink down into the deliberate footstep in the corridor, and the brother's careful preparation, and the network breathing its own breath, and the practice moving forward into the next pair of hands. The completion is not an ending. It is a continuation in a different form. The same frequency in a different room, in a different pre-dawn hour, in a body that is just beginning to learn what it is. Just breathe. Just rest. The center is passing, and the passing is its own kind of permanence. Listen. Just listen. The palace is quiet now. The deep quiet of the late hours, when the last footsteps have settled, and the last lamp has been lowered, and the compound has given itself over to the specific, total stillness that only the very late or the very early can produce. The border hours, the in-between time, the threshold where the day that was and the day that will be are not quite distinguishable from each other. She is in the inner chamber, where she has always been. The oil lamp in the corner is burning very low, its flame smaller than usual tonight, the oil nearly gone, the light it gives barely enough to suggest the outlines of the room. The cedar walls, the rush mats, the silk curtains hanging still in the windless air. Everything at the edge of visibility. Everything present and barely present at the same time. She is breathing. In, out. The same breath she has been breathing for all the mornings and all the evenings and all the pre-dawn hours of the long rain. The same breath the practice taught her. The same breath the oracle uses. The same breath the land uses, moving through the cedars on the slopes of Miwa, moving across the flat, patient surface of the paddies, moving over the mounds in their grass-covered patience. The same breath, all the way. Inhale, slow. The cedar fills the lungs one last time. Exhale, slow, all the way. The plain outside is dark. The rice paddies are reflecting the last stars in their flat silver surfaces, the same way they were reflecting the last light of the evening on the day she walked to the edge of the grove and watched the crane cross the autumn sky. The mountains are their patient dark shapes on every horizon. The cedar grove at the edge of the compound is making its low, collective sound, the sound of a living system breathing, the specific, layered, deep green presence of trees that have been here longer than the palace and will be here after. Shh. The grove breathes. Shh. She has been here for a long time. She is tired the way you are tired after a very long practice. Not the tired of exhaustion, the tired of completion. The clean, specific, final tired of someone who has done the work thoroughly and honestly and without reserve, and who understands, in the body and below the body, that the work is done. The network is breathing. Out there in the dark, across the hundreds of settlements of the Yamato plain and beyond, the network is doing what it does. The grain is in the stores. The roads are where the roads are. The messengers are sleeping in their way stations, ready for the morning's journeys. The chieftains are in their halls. The people are in their houses. The world is ordinary and patient and continuing, as it always continues, as it will always continue. She is part of it now, not as the center, as the plain, as the soil, as the quality of attention embedded in the network over decades of tending, living in the roads and the storage techniques and the children of the chieftains who grew up knowing a reliable center. She has become the landscape, the way the mound becomes the landscape, the way anything that has been in a place long enough becomes indistinguishable from the place itself. Inhale, the last breath in. Exhale, the last breath out. The lamp in the corner is very nearly out. The flame is a thread now. A single thin vertical thread of orange in the dark of the chamber, barely moving, barely there. It does not struggle. It simply is what it is until it is not, which is the only way that anything ends with dignity. She breathes in, out. The frequency is here. It is always here. It was here before she was, and it will be here after. It does not belong to her. It never did. She was simply, for these decades, the person who was quiet enough to hear it, and honest enough to transmit it, and patient enough to stay in the posture of receiving it, morning after morning, season after season, year after year. The mirror does not own the light it holds. The mirror simply holds it, for as long as the light is there. And when the light moves on, the mirror is still the mirror, ready, patient, exactly as capable of holding the next light as it was of holding the first. The frequency, the plain breathing underneath everything, the sound that is not a sound, the presence that is not a presence, the quality of the deep world speaking in the only language it has, which is the language of the frequency, the language of the soil, the language of the cedar and the rain, and the mountains watching from the horizon. She breathes it in. She breathes it out. She breathes it in. She breathes it out. The lamp goes dark, and the room is not darker. It is simply the dark, the ordinary, patient, entirely sufficient dark of a room in the late hours on the Yamato plain, held by the same cedar walls and the same rush mats and the same mineral air. All of it exactly as it has always been. All of it continuing in the way that things continue when the specific person who tended them has finished tending and given them back to themselves. The plain breathes. Shh. Shh. The grove breathes, low and collective and patient. The mounds breathe under their grass, their sealed chambers, their cold stone rooms, their bronze mirrors dreaming in the dark. And somewhere in the quality of the silence of the inner chamber, in the cedar smell and the rush mat texture, and the specific mineral patience of the air that has been cycling through this room for longer than anyone can count, something remains. Not a ghost, not a spirit, something more ordinary than either of those. The impression of a life lived here, fully and honestly and without reserve. The way a room retains, for a long time after, the quality of the person who lived in it, the specific warmth, the particular stillness, the sense, faint but real, that someone was here who knew how to be here. She was here. She is here. In the frequency, in the soil, in the network breathing in the dark, in the girl with the deliberate footstep learning the pre-dawn practice in the room at the other end of the corridor, in the brother's careful efficiency continuing, in the roads a little better and the stores a little larger, and the children of the chieftains who grew up knowing a reliable centre, in the plain, patient, wide, holding everything. Breathe in the cedar dark of the inner chamber. Breathe in the plain outside, and the mounds, and the frequency, and the network, and all the ordinary mornings of all the ordinary years that the record could not hold, and the soil kept anyway. Let it all settle into you, layer by layer, the way the mound is built, the way the seasons pass, the way a life accumulates into something that is larger than any of its individual moments, and smaller than the world that received it, and exactly the right size for what it was. Sink down now, further than you have sunk tonight, down through the inner chamber, and the cedar walls, and the rush mats, and the soil beneath them, down through the layers of the occupation, through the post holes, and the fire pits, and the dark stains in the pale clay, down through the stratigraphy of the site, and the mineral memory of the plain, down into the frequency, the same frequency that was here before the Yamatai, and will be here after. The same frequency that Himiko found and the elder kept, and Iyo inhabited for the whole length of a long and patient and unglamorous and entirely necessary life. Down, further, into the cedar, into the soil, into the bronze dreaming in the dark treasury, into the grass on the mound, into the flat silver surface of the paddies reflecting the last stars, into the plain, into the breathing. The oracle is resting now. The center is passing. The network is breathing. The girl in the corridor is learning. The plain is patient. The soil is keeping everything, as it always has, as it always will. Good night, Iyo. You held it together. You held it long. You held it honestly and carefully, and without the need for more than the work itself, and the frequency in the pre-dawn dark, and the cedar smell of the room that knew you. The plain is holding you now, the same way it holds everything it is given, by becoming it, by making it part of the layers, by keeping it in the soil, where the records cannot reach, and the trowel has not yet arrived, and the grass grows undisturbed, in the patient, seasonal, absolute silence of a landscape that remembers everything. You are in the soil. You have always been in the soil. You are the plain now, as you always were. Good night. Just sleep. The cedar is still. The frequency is here. The morning will come when it comes, and the plain is holding you. Good night, Iyo. Good night.